Hello, good evening or good morning. I don't know where you are, Ramsey. I'm very, very happy to welcome here my very good friend Ramsey Bahoud. It is a long story between us. First time I saw him and discussed with him, it was almost 20 years ago. And I am a fan of his books. He wrote 6 books. Four of them have been translated into French. And I have a particular love for the book published in 2010. My father was a freedom fighter, Gaza's Untold Story. It is really a wonderful book with Lao history, the history, the first person history, and a wonderful book. But to prepare this interview, we will not speak about all these books. To prepare this interview, I prepared my questions exclusively by referring to the 2 long interviews you gave online recently. The first one was published at the end of 2021. The date is very important with Ilan Pappé. And the second in October 25. And I was really very, very interested in comparing the view, the vision, the idea. I will tell also the ideology maybe you presented, and this is what we like discuss. In the first interview, you present a very thick a book. I got it here. I read all these books. This is the book, this one. This is Our Vision for Liberation. Engage Palestinian leaders and intellectuals speak out. Our Vision for Liberation in 2022. So for this book, you interviewed about 30 Palestinian intellectuals on the theme of their personal history and their vision for liberation. In the video interview with Ilan Pappé, you emphasize the progress made particularly by intellectuals in humanizing and thus shifting public opinion in favor of Palestinian emancipation. You stress the shift in the narrative we are witnessing, and I quote you, "We can now talk about apartheid, occupation, colonization, human rights, and ethnic cleansing." Yet you say, "Our language has won." You quote the contribution of Ibrahim El Aoudé, whose title seems to me summarize the message of the book, between brackets, the struggle for control of the narrative. But 5 years later, there is still a resistance to this narrative. In France, particularly, the major publisher Fayard cancelled the French reprint of Pappé's Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. And in the court in France, the courts are overwhelmed with attacks by Zionist lobbies for the so-called apology of terrorism. How could you explain that?
Well, first of all, great to talk to you again, Christophe, and thanks for all of your efforts and all of the work that you do. I follow you closely. And it's great pleasure to talk to you and to be interviewed here to discuss some really critical issues that I think, because of the nature of the news and the genocide, many fundamental issues, many critical issues have been kind of fallen by the sideways, as they say, in the sense that we are not talking about the changing discourse that has happened as a result of the genocide, and per what you've talked about earlier, even before the genocide. So we've been talking about a shifting discourse, a shifting language before even the genocide itself has taken place. And and before the Palestinian discourse and the pro-Palestine narrative has kind of penetrated so many layers of various societies all across the world. I mean, what we are witnessing right now is something that even the most optimistic amongst us did not expect. We have been talking about a paradigm shift underway. We have been talking about a critical mass that is going to be reached at one point in the future, but we did not know that within the matter of 2 years, that critical mass is going to be reached and that paradigm shift is going to finally take place. Now, there's a difference between us reaching a point in which we have a majority of the people on our side, and for that to translate into political value and political and policies. These are two different things that, or currents that we have to examine. The fact that the Palestinian voice and the pro-Palestinian voice is being attacked with such intensity all over the world, it means that there is fear. They are scared. They're scared of us. I mean, let's admit it. When I first went to the States in the mid-1990s, we used to meet, we used to go on protests, we used to organize as activists at universities. Nobody cared. We were not mentioned in even local media, let alone national media. We were not a subject of conversation. We were just this kind of irritants that are always standing on the sidewalks. We had no impact. And because we had no impact, the Zionists and the pro-Zionists and mainstream politicians and media and academics did not really pay much heed to us, because they did not see, or they did not really kind of link what we were doing to any challenge to the Zionist project and to Israel and to the United States foreign policy and to all of that. The fact that they are fighting us over every word, every video, every tweet, every book, every article, every statement, the fact that you have literally thousands of legal cases locked against Palestinians and pro-Palestinian voices all over the world. In the US, it's just an incredible number of cases. Every little thing is a legal case. They're trying to intimidate, they're trying to break us, they are trying to, they are trying to push us to silence, to marginalize our voices, because they have finally reached a point where they can see us as a threat, and not any threat, a real threat. Israel is now a bad brand. Netanyahu is a bad brand. Palestine is now everywhere. Since the genocide took place, I have traveled many countries and many cities to talk about Palestine. And even for someone who is so very much engaged with the everyday today events regarding solidarity, I am still shocked by the degree of knowledge that has penetrated society, from Italy to Spain to Britain to Turkey to everywhere. Palestine is now, or being pro-Palestine is a badge of honor. And it's no longer an academic subject. It's no longer an isolated intellectual conversation. It is no longer a group of people kind of battling it out in the marketplace of ideas, as they put it. No, we are talking about ordinary people, working class people. People are beginning to connect and become so aware of what Palestine is, what Gaza is, what the simple narratives and the references of Palestinian culture are, what is the Nakba, and so forth and so on. And nothing that Israel has been able to do so far has reversed this trend an iota. And that's why the pressure on people like Ilan, on so many other, or Professor Pape, or people, writers, intellectuals, academics of any kind, activists, ordinary activists, so much pressure. Because now we are the ones at the front line, along with millions of people, and we are standing there, and we are not only trying to shift the narrative on Israel, in many ways we have, but now we are trying to push that narrative to translate to actual policy.
Yes,
and
we will discuss about all that. With Ilan Pape, you both advocate, between brackets, one single secularized state and so on. without specifying the manner and the chronology of its construction. Pape argues for a new Palestinian unity. And to promote the Palestinian narrative, you are looking for a Mandela, a Gandhi. Failing that, a Marwan Barghouti or Hamed Saadat are in jail. Is the Palestinian liberation really depending on a leadership?
No, maybe there's something taken out of context there, but I do not think we need a Mandela or a Barghouti or a single individual. To the contrary, my entire philosophy, my entire take on history is centered in people's history. And Christoph, you are familiar with my books and my writings, and you see how I try to kind of challenge the classical narratives on Palestine, including the Palestinian narrative itself that centered Palestinian history around individuals, be it Yasser Arafat or Ahmed Yassin or Marwan Barghouti. In my history, I look at ordinary people, at the masses, at Palestinian masses. They are the ones who are ultimately able to make the difference. Look, for example, at the situation in Gaza. This is not about firepower. The fact that Israel could not defeat Palestinians in Gaza is not about firepower, because if it's about firepower, let's look at what kind of firepower the Palestinians have. They have very little. They manufacture their own weapons in tunnels, and we are talking about some explosives, with various names that they made up. That's not why Palestinians managed to withstand the pressure, not only of Israel, but nearly 70 countries, including the United States and pretty much most of Western Europe and many other countries around the world that stood on the side of Israel, when no official state openly stood on the side of Palestinians in terms of material support, yet Palestinians withstood. It's not because of our weapons. It's not because of a specific individual, because as you saw, most of the leadership of Gaza was killed during the war. So what is it?
My question was provocative, and I wanted, you had a very good expression in your last interview. You say, nobody is looking, that there is an elephant in the room, and the elephant is the room. This is the Palestinian people, of course.
It's exactly.
Thank you for developing.
Absolutely, and in fact, I mean, I think I mentioned the quote in the book of. In fact, in my preface, I start with the quote by Che Guevara when he says that there are no liberators; the people liberate themselves. So I'm a very strong believer that ultimately it's the mass of people, it's the collective will of the people that ultimately makes all the difference.
Thank you. Maybe you know Simone Weil. Simone Weil, born in 1909 and she died in 1943. She is one of the most well-known French philosophers of the 20th century. She was completely a pacifist, but at the end of the 30s, she concluded that one could be a pacifist and, when there is no other choice, a supporter of armed struggle. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I mean, we can enter into this whole subject of how philosophers themselves are victims of history or are reflection of history. I mean, philosophers write about their own experiences within a specific time and place in history, and her shift in her, intellectual output seems to be consistent with the reality that was happening around her. And I think the same thing is happening or has been happening in Palestine. This is not, you are familiar with the Palestinian people. You've been to Gaza many times. You have many Palestinian friends, and you are aware of how Palestinian community dynamics go. We are not violent people. Violence is not the first option that comes to the mind of the Palestinians. They are kind, they are generous. So when they start using armed resistance to fight, we have to ask the question, what are the circumstances that push them to that point, as opposed to examine their armed resistance as if it is the problem or the issues that needs to be confronted. When you have over 100,000 tons of explosives dropped on an area of about 360 or 365 square kilometers, destroying over 90% of everything that was standing in that place, and killing and wounding over 10% or 12% of the population, then you have to even think about armed struggle, not even as within the context of, is it a right? Is it sanctioned under international law? And we know it is a right and it is sanctioned under international law. But you think of it in terms of the last stand. It's about survival. If your entire family has been killed and you have one child left behind, and you have the option of defending that child against a soldier that is coming to kill or rape or burn, what do? You throw anything that comes in your way, whether it's a knife from your kitchen or a chair or a rock or a bullet. It saddens me that even we Palestinians have to engage in that conversation while our enemy is being applauded and defended in his right to carry out a genocide. We are being questioned that we are just in our final moments of this earth take a position that of trying to defend our families.
Thank you. In the interview you gave to India Global Left in October 2025, so 2 years after October 7th, you begin the interview with a statement that has previously long resonated in my head. I quote you: "In the West, even on the left, there is a fear of talking about resistance because people don't want to appear sympathetic to certain groups viewed in a certain way by Western society." So it's a beautiful sentence, but of course the name of this group is well known, Hamas and Jihad Islamic, and that's true that it is very difficult to speak about that, and we are going in France directly, if we see on the social media, directly to the court. So you express this idea after a very convincing argumentation like you did right now. Is it time now to mention Hamas and to interrogate their leaders, even in the Western media?
Absolutely. I mean, just from an intellectual point of view, I mean, imagine you and I are going to have a conversation about a particular side, about this very issue: Israel, Palestine, Palestinian liberation, Zionism, and so forth. But before we start the conversation, I tell you, whatever you say, you're not allowed to touch on or utter the following words. And I give you this long list. From an intellectual point of view, how can we possibly engage intellectually and reach any kind of conclusion? If you can't talk about resistance, I mean, remember in the beginning of the genocide, some, including Germany, some European countries did not even allow pro-Palestinians to carry the flag. So even the flag is out of that intellectual conversation. So you can talk, you are free to talk. We are living in a liberal, free, democratic state, but you cannot carry a flag, mention Hamas, talk about armed resistance. You can't talk about this. So what am I allowed to speak about? And how could the limitation on my discourse be of any help, not only to the Palestinians, but to any meaningful conversation on the situation in Palestine? And sadly, many of us, not just in the left, I noticed that even some Palestinians are afraid to speak about it because they have been told you cannot touch these subjects because it doesn't bode very well for you or your career or your travels or your life. So as a result, we are all trapped in, I would say, 5% of the conversation. 5%. And you would say, okay, that may seem to be an exaggeration, Ramzy. Why 5%? Because you cannot talk about Palestine without talking about resistance. And we cannot talk about agency without talking about resistance. You cannot talk about so many subjects where resistance is not the heart of that conversation. So what's the point of us even having a conversation in the first place if we cannot talk about the most fundamental elements and relevant points in that conversation?
Today, after the publication of the Trump, or the so-called the Trump plan for two Trump plan, which is supposed to lead to a ceasefire, we thank the governments that allowed the agreement, but between brackets, there is an elephant in the room again, the Palestinian people who have set themselves in motion through, you described the shift from resilience to resistance. And you say, for 100 years, the Palestinians would never have succeeded in achieving such a result without this resistance. And you go on with a statement that has not yet convinced European leaders, despite they have recognized the Palestinian state. The resistance cannot be disarmed. There is no arsenal to inventory. And you quote as an historian, the national liberation that could not have been achieved without resorting to armed struggle.
Absolutely. So the Trump's Gaza plan, I mean, is just, it's a mockery. It's I've been trying to classify it even within the history of American foreign policy. What doctrine is this? What is happening? The idea that you can become a member of the Board of Peace if you pay $1 billion renewable, as if you are going to a gym or a club of some kind. It's just really laughable what's happening here on the part of the Americans. But what really matters to me is that if you look at the structure, the political structure that the Americans and the Israelis and their allies in the region and internationally trying to create, they are trying to create a structure that does not involve the Palestinians. I mean, for them, there is the Palestinian does not really exist. I mean, we are going back to the days of Golda Meir, when she said in that infamous interview in 1967 or 1969 rather, you keep asking me about the Palestinians. It's not like there was such a people there called the Palestinians and we kicked them out. They do not exist. And we are going back to those years. You are talking about a group of billionaires and heads of states, and they are somehow are becoming responsible for the welfare and the survival and the political aspirations of the Palestinian people. We are going back to the Balfour Declaration, where someone is granting Palestine on behalf of Her Majesty's government to someone else living somewhere else. This is not going to fly now. It's not going to happen now. I mean, if the thing is, this never even succeeded back then. I mean, the Palestinian people didn't take it lightly. They resisted, they fought from Izzuddin al-Qassam in the 1920s and 30s to the first Palestinian uprising in 1936, all the way to the struggle that led us to the Fidaiyin movement, to the first Intifada, to the second Intifada. So Palestinians would not accept their marginalization back then. Imagine now, when the whole world is on our side, when people all over the world show solidarity and strong support and sympathy with Palestine and the Palestinian people, why would the Palestinian people that has some of the most educated men and women anywhere in the Middle East, and they are so politically savvy and involved and engaged in their own struggle, would accept their marginalization and their erasure rather today? Of course, we know for a fact that this is not going to work out, but it is important that we register that in American and Israeli mind, the only Palestinian that matters, or the only solution to this so-called conflict, is when the Palestinian does not exist as a political
a state is defined as a territory guaranteed by an army. In this specific case, the Palestinians seem reduced to trying to obtain an American guarantee, even though the US is one of the aggressors. Do you know another military power with significant power in the region that could provide this guarantee?
Unfortunately, for the time being, we are living in the age of monsters, in the words of Antonio Gramsci. We are living in an era in which the world is being reordered somehow, and we are back to the bipolar or the multipolar world. Rather, we are going back to areas and zones of influence, and everybody is now kind of trying to fortify his own sphere. Nobody has time for the Palestinians, unfortunately. When we were counting on Russia, we were counting on China, we were counting on some kind of a popular upheaval in the Arab world that is going to turn the tables and mix the cards. None of this has happened, and that's one of the saddest things that has happened during the genocide, is all the variables that we hoped would be of direct relevance to the outcome of Gaza. None of them actualized. Yet the Palestinians continued to fight, and they did not surrender until the very end. But will there be an army that anytime soon would be able to stand up and challenge Israel, challenge the United States dominance? I think this is left to be seen. I think I am always optimistic about the changes that are happening in the Middle East. I think this madness by Trump and Netanyahu are indicative of the fact that they are aware that time is running out, and they are trying to protect their influence and their power in the region. But the region itself is changing. How long will it take before we see solid, real resistance to Israel and the United States? It is very difficult to tell at this stage. But one thing we know for a fact, that the Palestinians themselves, under no circumstance, will give up. And we know that because we know Palestinian history very well.
Yes, but I will tell my question again. There is a military power in the area, and this military power showed its power the last few months. This is Iran. Iran is able, if it decides, to push Israel to respect the international law. You don't think it is something?
No. I think that's a very good point, because that takes us to the axis of resistance and to the kind of the spoken but non-written agreement between various resistance movements in the region prior to the genocide, that an attack on one is an attack on all. None of these conflicts have been sorted out as far as Israel and the US are concerned. Ansarullah remains strong, undefeatable. Hezbollah did not surrender, but there was no decisive outcome. And Iran, of course, remains there, and it showed its capability of at least neutralizing the Israeli power, which really is something that Israel has not experienced. I know many in Arab and Middle Eastern media, I don't know how closely you follow that, and of course, Western media notwithstanding, they did everything in their power to minimize the Iranian response to Israel in the 12-day war. But again, as people who have been reporting on this, writing about this, researching about this, we have never seen this kind of situation where Israel is under this kind of attack, where Israel is all in the shelters, where Israel is incapable of withstanding the kind of pressure to the point of seeking or beseeching, rather, Trump to kind of force some sort of a peace or truce between Iran and Israel. But we also have to be a bit careful here, because the Israeli strategy so far has been to create distraction for each one of these forces separately. In the case of Ansarullah, they are trying to start a new distraction in Somaliland with Emirates' help in Yemen. In the case of Hezbollah, they are trying to create national upheaval in Lebanon itself, turning the army and the government against the resistance. And in Iran, of course, they are using the internal dynamics of the country itself to create these distractions so that these powers cannot be unified. So this is the Israeli strategy, and so far the battle is still in the middle of the fight. We haven't seen any real outcomes so far. And it's very important that we know this. Just because the genocide in the old intensity of hundreds of people being killed every day, just because that slowed down a bit, it doesn't mean that the war is over. The war is still raging, and the outcome is yet to be determined. And as you know, there are many variables involved.
Thank you. Did you read the book, the Iranian book, Palestine Referendum? Palestine Referendum. I will send you. This is the official position of the Iranian power, and really, it's not stupid. This is something I think we have to take into account into the idea to build the future. What do you think of a very old proposal, several decades, for the immediate establishment of a Palestinian state within the 67 borders, combined with a long-term truce, 10 years, 20 years or more? Following this truce, a referendum will be organized across the entire territory of the Palestine. Of course, the details would need to be analyzed. Long-term truce.
Right. So the genocide taught me something, because I mean, we have to understand that when you have an attempt at the very extermination of your people, you cannot view politics the same way that you viewed it prior to the genocide. There's something fundamentally changes in your mind, individually and collectively. I think that the age of the proposals would have to be put on the side for now. Israel is a country that openly aims at the very destruction, not of the fabric of the Palestinian people, not of the destruction of the peace process, not in the destruction of a certain Palestinian faction. No, the destruction of the Palestinian people, as in the erasure, the physical erasure of the Palestinian people. This is not a country that will be engaged in any peace proposals anytime soon. This is not a country that would be interested even in utilizing the word peace as part of its political discourse. So I would say that regardless of the nature of the proposal, and frankly, even the one-state solution, I don't think Israel is, for the time being, seeking solutions. Israel is seeking to destroy the Palestinian people, and therefore the Palestinian response and all Palestinian energy have to focus on, number one, not allowing Israel to erase Palestine and the Palestinian people. Two, to build a strong and powerful global solidarity movement that is able to turn numbers into actual policies. Three, to isolate Israel, to sanction Israel, to marginalize Israel, and to turn Israel into a pariah state.
Thank you.
And only then possibility of an actual solution.
If Europe wanted to participate in resolving the conflict at a minimal cost, to my opinion, it should restore the voice of that had been cut off from the Palestinians. That is to say, Europe should remove the three main national liberation organizations, Hamas, Fatah, and PFLP, from the list of terrorist organizations. Do you support this proposal?
I mean, this is like simple politics. This is not even a moral position, to be honest. And we can't expect any moral position from Europe anyway. This is simple political conclusion. As a state, you engage with powerful political actors, the ones who matter, the ones who are making the difference. You could disagree with them. You could disagree with their ideology or political outlook. But you can't tell me that these organizations that actually have managed to not only to push back against Israel, the United States, and so many other countries at a time that we thought we have reached the final chapter in the history of the Palestinian people. Organizations of that kind of power, that kind of influence, that kind of legitimacy among their people, but also throughout the Middle East and the Muslim world, and of course worldwide, especially in the global South, I think it's just sound politics to engage with them instead of utilizing the language of terrorism and that sort of thing. Because by not engaging with these organizations, Europe is rendering itself irrelevant. They are becoming marginal political actors. So you have to engage, you have to talk to them in order for you to truly become aware of what those people, who are, in my mind, much better representative of the Palestinian people than the Palestinian Authority, by far, what do they want, what are their aspirations, and how you can actually be kind of a positive and constructive force in achieving a just peace in Palestine.
Regarding the so-called reconstruction of Gaza, based on my 25 years of intermittent living in Gaza, I fully support the proposal you did for the reconstruction. Could you, for our audience, detail it? What did you propose? A Riviera investment, full investments, all the American company contractors, and so on. There is another option. I witnessed a lot of time the last 20 years. Could you comment?
Of course, and of course, you forgot to mention taking the Palestinian people out so that they can clean up the place. In Trump's words, of course, I mean, construction for Israel. Let's just think about how Israel views the construction in Gaza. Israel destroyed Gaza and much of Gaza. I mean, many of these centers and the hospitals were provided by European money, by money coming from Turkey, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, the Saudis, and so forth. A lot of the infrastructure comes from the so-called donor countries. And you would think that the donor countries are not even protesting. I mean, they have invested decades in creating this infrastructure in Gaza. Israel came and pulverized it, and they are not even protesting the fact that Israel has done so. Because at the end of the day, it is their money and it is their investment. The Palestinian people are very skilled people, very resourceful people. I mean, I have seen videos of Palestinians building their destroyed houses, laying the floors and the tiles right in the middle of the genocide, while the neighborhood is still being bombed. They are extremely creative, extremely resourceful. I have absolutely no concerns that the Palestinian people have the capability of rebuilding Gaza in a much faster time than any estimation. But that's not the issue. The issue is that Israel and the United States and their allies want to leverage. They want to leverage the reconstruction of Gaza to win political concessions. We will give you cement if you give us your arms. We will give you food if you give us your sovereignty and your agency. And that is going to be the problem. So the issue is not the reconstruction. The issue is what that reconstruction in Gaza is being exchanged with. And are Palestinians willing to pay that price? And I tell you from now, again, long experience in reading and writing about history, Palestinians in Gaza in particular, they will never allow Israel and the US to leverage the reconstruction of Gaza no matter what.
Thank you. Do you believe in this so-called apolitical technical committee composed of technocrats that is supposed to administer Gaza?
No, I don't believe in it at all. First of all, it includes a single Palestinian, Dr. Ali Shat. I have nothing personal against Dr. Shat. The fact that he was a former deputy minister within the Palestinian Authority, we know where his allegiance lies, and we have very little trust of the Palestinian Authority. We also know that such other characters involved, have ties to various political or financial interests and think tanks and that sort of thing. But the question is, why are the Palestinians in Gaza allowing this to happen? Why can't they just say, you know what? No, absolutely not. This technical committee has to be from Gaza, not only including Gazans, it has be made entirely of Gazans. And the reasons that they are not doing that, and we have to be honest about this, Christoph, is that the degree of loss in Gaza is so difficult to comprehend that they are willing to kind of allow themselves to engage in these political games, knowing that they are not going to get much from it in terms of politics in the future, but they are desperate. They are desperate for medicine, they are desperate for food, they are desperate for any construction material. And that desperation is kind of allowing that a bit of space for them to accommodate certain things, even though they completely go against the political aspiration of the Palestinian people and against the very dignity of Gaza. But I think this is the kind of compromises that they have been forced into, considering the fact that they have 9,000 people remain under the rubble of their own homes. The other day I was watching a video of a Palestinian who was using a special kind of device, like a stivel, I think it's called, we call it ghurbal in Arabic, looking for his wife, trying to find the little bones of his wives and children under the rubble of his house in Jabalia by, kind of going through the sand and the dirt of his own house in order for him to find the bones and to bury them. Gaza is in absolute pain. Gaza is in absolute grief. And that, in my opinion, has resulted in the acceptance so far of certain things that Gaza has rejected in the past. It's just the nature of their situation right now. I don't think this is going to last forever. I think it's temporary. But again, they are pushed to it by circumstances beyond their control.
Thank you very much. Now we will finish with some quiz. Okay, I like very much quiz. So there is a quotation. I would like to ask you, who is the author of this quotation? You will always find someone who will come forward to propose yet another Oslo, whatever the name you give him. And so after every instance of resistance from our people, politicians will come to try and reap the benefits. I think many people could say that, but I am interested in the origin of this text.
The original. Can you give me clues? Can I call a friend?
I don't know your friends. Can you imagine?
But I mean, yeah, as you said,
I will give you some another item. The same person,
sure.
The same person wrote, "I didn't go to war; it came to me. Westerners are obsessed with armed resistance, with the means rather than the objective, which is a state based on democracy, pluralism, and cooperation, a state that protects rights and freedom, where differences are addressed with words, not guns." The same author.
Most likely it's one of the leaders of the resistance in Gaza. I don't know who's in particular. It could be Yahya Sinwar, but I'm not certain. Yes. Okay.
Yahya Sinwar. Now I have the last quiz. For me, the future of the Palestinian Authority is extension if it remains the same. If it maintains their rhetoric it uses today, that will end very badly. Or it will return to the struggle, standing side by side with us against Israel, and that is what will revive it. Regarding the armed resistance, it is not just the strength that has changed, but also the type of military interventions taking place today. Our military uses much more sophisticated means. The military option is currently our choice, our strategy, and it will remain so until we manage to conclude a truce with Israel.
Is it possible that it's also Sinwar?
No, it's Sheikh Yassin. But
Sheikh
it
Yassin,
was
yeah.
in 98.
Okay.
And I remember I went for the first time in 2001 to Gaza, and I had a discussion with Ayad Serraj, the psychiatrist, and Haidar Abdel Shafi from PFLP. And they mentioned at the time one of the best things that the Palestinian Authority could do immediately at the time in 2001 is complete resignation. And so what I see is that there are a really common targets and means on the way for liberation between the left, the true left, not the left you mentioned with Chai, and the Islamic movements. The target is the same. I remember that the chief of the Communist Party in the West Bank, in the 48 territory in Israel, shifted to Hamas. And you know perfectly someone who did the same shift, isn't it?
Who's that?
Your father.
Oh, yes, of course. But although my father, it was not an ideological shift as much as it was a political shift. But yeah, it's really quite interesting because you mentioned the left. I mean, we have seen it during the genocide. The fighters from the PFLP, from the socialist group, along with Hamas fighters, Islamic Jihad fighters, and other fighters carrying out battles, in various parts of Gaza together. It's really the first time that we kind of see this kind of ideological unity, or rather ideology not being relevant in the political attitude in the battlefield of the Palestinian. And I think that is a precedent in our history, in a sense. So also Gaza represents a model of how ideology does not have to be a hindrance, but it could actually become a point of unity, as if we have the same common political ideals.
Thank you very much, Ramzi. That's the end. I thank you very, very, very much, and I hope to see you soon, for sure.
Thank you very much, Christoph, and I hope to see you as well. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you.